How's everybody doing? This is David W. Williams, also known as the Retail Trader. Appreciate y'all for coming through. I know it's a Saturday. A lot of people out getting some sunshine, getting their activities in, swimming, kind of based on where part of the country that they're at. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come through. And so what I'm going to talk about today is allies of co-belligerents, right? Why your group is losing in economic warfare. Okay. So really quickly, the sponsor of the show is the highest paid online. Again, our VIP options course. We're going to have a 50% off sale on that, right? You're going to get about another 7 days before that sale is going to be over. And then we're probably going to almost double the price after this particular sale is over. And that's going to be starting in the month of July. So again, I want to really encourage you to look into that or look at some of anything else that we're offering to you. Decide whether or not it works for you and you want to move forward. Okay. So also some more kind of news after next week. I'm going to kind of stop with a lot of the lives. It's been a very, very robust and consistent schedule for the past 5 years. And there's been a lot of sacrifices made, especially like my Saturdays are normally taken up trying to figure out how to compose content in a way in which I think people can digest it and walk away with something, as opposed to just kind of get up in here and just freelance and say whatever I think, comes to mind. Right. And so there's been a really big sacrifice in that particular effort. And so I've been kind of led to kind of take a break from that. And I don't use kind of like these words that a lot of people use. I just call it taking a break, taking a little bit of a vacation, right? It's not this kind of theatrical thing that, people kind of like to try to do on the internet, right? I'm not really into that. And I'm not down on anybody else if that's what they do. But I'm just going to take a little bit of a break, take a little bit of a vacation until I feel led to kind of resume that schedule. And really quickly want to go ahead and say this. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit more next week. But I just wanted to say it like when I first came on this internet, and really started creating a lot of content in YouTube land. It just was very, very unfamiliar to me. A lot of the voices that were out here, because they really were not people that I would take serious in the real world, right? They just weren't. A lot of women who liberalism has failed them, but they, for some reason, thought black men was the reason. But like really buying into liberalism has failed them over the past 25, 30 years. A lot of black men that were very irresponsible, and they also blamed everybody else. And so I kind of really learned from By the Hood is to give people a different option as to what they have the ability to consume and learn from. And so that's really what I try to do. And I try to be very, very consistent with that. And so been on the schedule of 4 years of putting out a certain amount of videos a week. At one time, it was 3 videos a week, and I kind of dropped it to 2. But just being very, very consistent. And anytime you're doing something at this continual rate, there's always something that you're taking away from other environments, or you're taking away from other situations, or you're taking other opportunities away. Something in economics that we call opportunity cost, which means that anytime you're doing one thing, there's something else that you could be doing that could be beneficial to you, but you don't have the ability to do it because you only have so much opportunity in front of you, right? And so what I'm going to do now is kind of look to try to pursue some of those other opportunity costs, because again, I don't get on here on Saturdays and just start talking off the top of my head. And it can sometimes take hours to put together something that I think is going to be coherent, because a lot of times my thoughts can be all over the place. So I have to sit down and try to put something together that's going to be a framework. I'm not a reaction channel where I let everybody else make their content and I just react to what other people have done. So it takes a lot of time. It is very well thought out. And I'm not just freelancing. And so there was a big sacrifice that had to be made. But what I was trying to be and what I was attempting to be was being obedient to what I was told to do. Okay. And so when we understand that our gains in this world, a lot of times are because people made sacrifices and people did things to where, okay, we're going to take away from here to get somewhere else. We often don't think about what that person lost. And so something I made a decision a long time ago is I'm not going to give everything to like trying to help people. And I end up on the short end of the stick, and they just say three days later, hey, I just don't want to do it. Like, I'm not going to do that. I've seen it happen to other people, and that's not a goal I desire or a situation I desire to be in, because I know that unless it's your real family, people can be flaky. They can be here today, gone tomorrow, because we live in a world where people think they have really more options and more time than what they really have, right? So I appreciated all the people, because there's people that have watched my videos and have reached out to me one-on-one and have asked me for help in certain areas. And I was really, really happy to help them. And I was also very happy they were receiving what I was saying. And, they won't ever feel comfortable giving me a testimonial. they won't ever feel comfortable probably even telling somebody that we work together. But I was very happy that they saw value in what I was doing, to the point where they say, hey, I want to reach out to you and ask you about 1, 2, 3. And if it was something that I was doing, because some things I'm just not doing. I don't do a lot of marketing consulting anymore. Right. At one time I did, but I was very happy that they helped me out. So it was a benefit because I understand how it feels to have questions about stuff in real life and really trying to solve real world problems. And nobody can really answer your questions. And you don't have people that are really telling you what you really need to know. The internet is full of a lot of people that are really just trying to promote themselves in the world. And that's really the internet. And then the other is just people complaining. Like 95% of TikTok is just people that complain all day. So there's really not a lot to get from that. And so I know how it feels to say, hey, I don't understand this. And I'm willing to do the work, but I just sometimes don't know the first steps I need to take. Or maybe I don't understand the framework. Or maybe I don't understand the workflow, right? Or maybe I don't understand the structure, right? And I know how that feels. So what we were trying to do is provide that here. So now there's almost 5 years worth of content, right? So anybody that lands here, they have a library of content that they can tap into, right? And so they won't be able to say what I could say was that the content didn't exist when I was looking for it. Because a lot of the things that we talk about on this channel, when I was looking for it, the content didn't exist. It just didn't, right? Media was very much gatekept. It was very difficult to get anything off. I remember the era where they took away public access television, right? And then I also wanted to get people to understand that they're not in a position that they think they are. And one of the easiest ways to get people to understand it is that when you engage with them and have a conversation with them, they don't know answers, right? But you went to college, you got a degree, you're function, you're an adult in our society, and we ask extremely basic questions about what's going on around you, you have no idea. And the job was to get people to really examine, well, maybe I don't know what I think I know. Maybe I just really don't. Maybe I've been deceived as to really how intelligent I am, right? And so some people actually got the message, other people have not, and that means I'm not the messenger for them, and that's fine, right? And so that was really the goal. We're going to now, when we come back, kind of start moving in a different direction as far as, because again, it's 5 years worth of work. So it's not as if the work has not been put in. It's not as if the consistency has not been put in. And it's not as if, I was trying to do this and then I switched to this and I ran whatever was hot. No, I just tried to stay very consistent around what I was talking about, which is economic warfare. And some people can accept it, some people can't. Some people can get it, some people can't. I talked about earlier today, the majority of the Black population is working class and they hate working class people. So that's a problem, right? With the majority of a group of working class, but they actually hate working class. So they try to do a lot of things to make it seem as if they're not working class, but everything about them speaks to being working class people. Then the things that come with that, right? So that's something I was pushing from day one, economic warfare. We've just seen now in 2025, you have an administration now start to language a lot of that stuff out. We was talking about that stuff in 2020, right? Big up to Erica Williams for giving me a launch, because there's nobody else in YouTube land that would have carried somebody with my message. There's nobody else. I know, because nobody else has carried my message except her, right? And by the hood. But there was nobody else in YouTube land that would carry my message, right? And I'm not talking about massive conspiracy theories, yada, yada, yada. But again, and we're going to get into a little bit more next week, is that talking to a majority Black audience, but especially a majority working class audience, which is also going to be the majority of Black people, right? About the fact that they're experiencing economic warfare is a prohibited topic for Black folks, right? It just is. And if you've been following this for 5 years, you would have figured that out by now, right? It's a prohibited topic. We can talk about everything else. People can react to everything else. Everything else can be the topic of the week, but we can't really talk about economic warfare and how it negatively impacts Black people. We can't even, let me explain something to you. We have Black economists who went to some of the best schools in this country, got PhDs from some of the best schools in the country, and they can't even talk about the topic. They have to go into politics and they have to go into anthropology and all these things. They can't talk about economic warfare and how it impacts Black folks. It's a prohibited topic, right? So that's why I said I'm always going to be very appreciative of Erica, because she gave me a platform to talk about a topic that is prohibited to talk about with Black folks. You can talk about everything else. Everything else is open to be talked about, except this topic and how it negatively impacts Black people. Living in the city to where the wealth disparity is the greatest in the whole country, right? But it's known as a Black city, but you can't talk about economic warfare. But again, living in the city where the income or the wealth disparity is considered some of the greatest in the whole United States, not New York, not Chicago, in Metro Atlanta, but really in the city of Atlanta, right? Poverty rates for Black people in the city of Atlanta are extremely higher than white people in the city of Atlanta, but it can't be talked about, right? We got to talk about everything else. So we have to really understand that we are experiencing warfare when there's something going on and the topic can't even be brought up, into where we program people to where they can't even communicate around the topic, right? But if you do a show around Sean Combs and the prostitutes that he was dealing with, you got 5,000 people in the chat, and the chat is just flying, right? And so people really have to start examining themselves, and that's something that we really try to help people understand, and really start to ask themselves, do I really like my life? And am I willing to do what it's going to take to change it? And it doesn't really have a lot to do with a lot of other people. Because as long as I just keep doing what I've always been doing, because I'm comfortable, I have a large degree of apathy around my environment, and I have a bunch of people to do it with, and I build community around, really sabotaging my own long-term success, then I'm happy. Because I can always find somebody on TikTok to complain with, or I can always find another gossip platform, right? I didn't realize that I got on YouTube. You got male gossip. You got dudes that create gossip for other dudes. Like it's a real, just a real weird situation we got going on right now today, right? So people really kind of got to look at those things. And that's really what the intent was, right? And so that's really what I just wanted to communicate out to people, right? Not looking for any kind of, parade or anything, just can really communicate. It was always to communicate people to where you are experiencing economic warfare. It is in the economic data. All this stuff that we've been told on YouTube, when I got on YouTube, they were saying that Black women make more than Black men. You can't find any BLS data over any year period to support that. There was a guy who just got on a political show. He's a gossip columnist. He's really a gossip creator. He creates gossip for women, but he's a man. And he repeated that same statement that Black women are somewhere in a better economic position because they go to college, yada, yada, yada. Like all of this stuff is false. And so the problem is when you don't really understand your economic position, you don't really understand your class position, you don't know what you need to do because you think you're somewhere that you're not. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? So there has to be something in you to where you want to keep receiving false messages about your situation. That's like me going to the Atlanta Falcons and telling them, well, you won the Super Bowl last year, and they believe in it. But they didn't win the Super Bowl last year, right? They didn't. They're a struggling team. But that's really like me going to the Atlanta Falcons and telling the Falcons, y'all won the Super Bowl last year. And everybody else in your division is trash, and they're not on your level. Like, you got to realize what's going on where we're messaging this type of falsehoods out to people and what it does to relationships, what it does to families, but what it does to make people realize really what do I need to do to improve my situation, because everybody's messaging to me that I'm great, right? And so people have built their lifestyle around these falsehoods, around people's economic situation, because this is how they eat. This is how they support themselves. The reason why I can get on this channel and talk about what I talk about, and the reason why I can tell the truth about certain stuff, because I don't eat off people just liking what I say. That's not how I eat. I actually have real skills. So I had to depend on the real skills and something that we call in the word being a tent maker, because I couldn't build it the way, well, I just got an audience of people, they just like what I say. So I'm so worried about them liking what I say, I can't say anything to where I think it's going to contradict the story that's already inside their head. I say, no, the story that you have inside your head around a lot of things is false. That story that Kevin Samuels was trying to pull out years ago about, the average Black man being middle class. I read the study. That study's based on Black men over 50 that are married, majority were ex-military. That's the actual study. The average Black man is not middle class, but it depends on how you define middle class. Black people as a group, the majority of black people as a group, whether they be male or female or working class people, that's the majority. And we're looking at their net worth and the assets that they hold. Okay? That's the majority. Right? So until we start to actually deal with the economic data and the real economic situation that's going to be localized from scenario to scenario, there will be no movement. Right? We'll have women in Cleveland saying, I want a guy to make six figures, and the median income for Cleveland is well under $50,000. So they'll just stay on the hamster wheel, and they'll just let more social media entertainers feed their head full of nonsense. Right? You'll have black men barely making $30,000 a year saying I'm middle class because some dude on YouTube told me I'm middle class. No, you're not, because that study was done on men who are primarily over 50, been married for decades, and were ex-military. That's where they pulled that study from, right? They didn't pull that study from guys that were in their 20s and their 30s, and they didn't pull it from single people. So when we don't really understand these things, it creates a falsehood, it creates a comfort level, it creates an apathy, and it creates a lot of disinformation and misinformation. And all my military people know that a big part of warfare is disinformation and misinformation. If you're engaged in war with someone, you may choose to say, you know what, we're going to feed, right, the channels with falsehoods and make our enemy think that this is true, but in reality, we're doing something else behind the scenes. And so they act on that, right? But in reality, that's not really what's going on, because we're feeding the channels with falsehoods. Militaries have done this for a very long time. They literally will create whole channels and fill it full of false information and hoping that their enemies pick it up. And so that's what we see with a lot of us, to where we have ingested a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation, and then we're thinking that we're in a situation that we're not in. And we're thinking that our economic condition is better than what it is. And in reality, many of us are a sickness away from going broke. We can't miss 2 weeks of work. Our net worth is slim to zero for a lot of us. Right? We're prolific consumers of consumer items that have no real value once to pass the point of purchase. But the messaging in all the media channels is that we're in a different position than we're currently in. So we just wanted to cut through the noise. One thing about, and if you start to understand people's personalities, different personalities hype to different things. But one thing we try to do is cut through a lot of that noise and to really reach out to people that wanted the real deal information, right? Didn't want to just get the next conspiracy story. Say, we're going to actually pull the data and present the data to you, right? This is what's actually going on. And then show you how to pull your own data so you can look at your own situation and understand what's going on, right? So that's something that we're going to also talk about today with why your group is losing economic warfare, because you don't understand the difference between allies and co-belligerents, right? You don't know the difference between it. So again, you're letting the channels of media, right, be filled with falsehood, because this is economic warfare, right? And so the media channels are filled with disinformation and misinformation. So you take that information and now you think, well, this is what I should do, but you don't realize you got bad information from the gate. It is not that everything comes in my mouth, I'm 100% correct. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I'm not getting on this YouTube with the goal of giving you a falsehood, right? Because somebody told me to do it, or that's how I think I'm going to make money. That's not what I'm doing. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? So let's go ahead and get into that. I didn't want to be too long. I've already been speaking for 20 minutes, but I wanted to go ahead and say that because I can tell I'm getting short to the end of it, because I'm feeling like I need to go ahead and say a lot of things before I dip off. But I want to just go ahead and say that, right? Because this is real. It's in the economic data. Right? And I'm a big believer in your personal economy first, right? I'm a big believer in your personal economy first. And if many of us don't understand how to get a good grasp of our personal economy, this situation is not going to get better for you, right? I was on Twitter just before I got on here, and the guy's talking about, well, you know, housing prices should go down in 2026, so you should wait to buy home. And I told him, well, if the housing prices don't go down in 2026, people are going to be locked out. Right? That's just a reality, right? The Trump administration, we know that Powell is gone next year. I think May next year, he's out of there. Okay? So whoever they bring in is going to give them the policy that they want. That's why they're going to put the person in position. I do not believe if they lower the rate that homes are going to become less expensive. Okay? If there's a recession, you have to believe the recession is not going to hit your personal economy. So do you have a situation in the world where your job is recession resistant, where the recession won't hurt your personal economy? Right? So this is what I want to help people understand, is that your personal economy, what you got going on, is what I would encourage you to build up to try to be able to withstand this economic warfare, and then you can spread out from there. But if you don't work on that and you just continue to get bad information from people, you're very apathetic about your future. You want to believe lies. You're the Atlanta Falcons and you want to believe that you won the Super Bowl last year, which you didn't win the Super Bowl last year. In fact, you're just a very average team at best. But if you want to keep believing that type of stuff, it can be very difficult for you to move forward because you don't really understand where you're currently at in this particular economy. Okay? So that's all we're going to talk about. Like I said, I don't want to be long-winded. I didn't want to really try to create this long monologue. But again, I just want to go ahead and just get that off my chest. And for the people that can receive it, they're going to get something from it. Other people, God bless you. I hope everything work out for you. So let's go ahead and get into it. Allies and co-belligerents, why your group is losing in economic warfare. So here's what I want to talk about. We're often told in this particular environment that we have allies, or somebody is an ally, or we should be in solidarity with other groups of people. I think that can be very, again, bad information or misinformation, because we have to kind of understand how these relationship dynamics work and how these things are actually defined. So the past 4 or 5 years, we've heard this term, kind of expressed a lot, called allyship, or being an ally. And I wouldn't say it's a new definition. It's a very old definition, but it's kind of being used a lot more. But we have to understand the difference between being an ally, an allegiance, and a co-belligerent, because they're not all the same thing. And if we think that we are in an allegiance with another group of people, but in reality, we're just co-belligerents against some opposition, then we don't understand the real relationship dynamic. If we're thinking that we're playing this game of allyship, right? But really what we need to be in is an allegiance with each other, or an alliance with each other, right? Then we're doing the wrong thing. So what it first comes down to is understanding the definitions of the words, and then understanding what situation are we currently in, and then what do we need to kind of maybe pursue to make the situation work for us, right? But assuming because me and somebody else may have similar enemies, or we may be in opposition to something else, and we agree on that, well, it doesn't make us allies on that issue. It could just make us co-belligerents. And so that's what we're going to kind of break down. So that's what I want people to really try to make themselves understand. So you realize, what kind of relationship dynamic do I need to form to solve this particular problem? And then also understand that if we're allies, right, or we're in some type of alliance, or we have an allegiance to each other, normally those situations are going to be negotiated. They're going to be terms around it, as opposed to we just don't like the same person. This is not middle school. This is not high school. We're not friends just because we don't like the same person. Like, we're too old for that. So that's what we're going to talk about. So really quick, I'm going to show you this video about a guide to allyship, because I want to kind of understand how we're defining that particular word, because we're using that word as a substitute for allies. We're also using that word as a substitute for being in an allegiance or being in an alliance with somebody else. And we're also using that word as a substitute for co-belligerent. So we're using that particular word for every scenario, but it really only fits a specific scenario. So let's go ahead and get into that real quick.
The word ally or allyship. Today, we're going to explore that concept just a little bit deeper. Dr. Rosemary Allen is here to help us. She's an expert on racial equity and an associate professor at Metropolitan State University of Denver's School of Education. Good morning, Dr. Allen.
Good morning.
Well, first of all, talk a little bit about allyship and what it is.
Well, allyship is the work of allies. It is the work of standing in solidarity with those who are suffering from inequities and those who are marginalized. And it may be standing up for issues or against issues that you are not directly impacted by, but in solidarity with those who are.
And what makes a really good ally?
A really good ally is one who's informed, who's educated, who knows the issues and understands that racism is very complex, understands the intersectionality, that racism can show up in the queer community, it can be economically based, it affects everything, and racism is everywhere. We have to also understand that an ally is not an identity, but it's a long-term process. And allies must be able to take leadership from people of color, but it's not standing back, but it's stepping up and stepping in, but doing that differently.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's her definition. Ain't no disrespect to her. That's kind of like the area in which she operates in. This is from 4 years ago when these kind of topics were really, really hot. But we just wanted to put that definition out there. Let me go ahead and get you some other definitions of some other terms. We go ahead and kind of break this thing down fully. Let me share that. Okay, so we have allyship definition. So the stated condition of being an ally, supportive association with another person or group. Okay, let me keep reading. Specifically, such association with members of a marginalized or mistreated group to which one does not belong. Do they give these examples? Right. So the actress also shared how her allyship with the LGBT community played a part in her interest in playing Shelley Pfeifferman in Transparent. Now we want to go into the definition of ally, right? To unite or form a connection or relationship between, that's a transitive verb. Intransitive verb, is that pronounced properly? To form and enter into an alliance. Alliance definition, right? The state of being allied, the action of allying, a bond of connection between family, states, parties, or individuals, an association to further the common interests of the members, union by relationship and quantities, a treaty or alliance, and then we're going to co-belligerent, right? A state or individual that cooperates with but is not bound by a formal alliance to another in waging war. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm from West Orlando. I never heard this word until 4 years ago, and nobody I know uses it, right? I'm not from academia. I'm not from an Ivy League college. No disrespect to people that went to Ivy League schools. I'm not from any of these podcast, social activist, social justice backgrounds. I'm from West Orlando. Okay. Never heard this word before in my life. Nobody I know uses this word. And I never heard people like use this in the kind of framework that they're using it. Right. And so I just really think it's an issue of people speaking different language and having different experiences, and very much a top down as opposed to a ground up type of perspective as to where we're going to frame language around certain stuff, and then we're going to expect everybody else to conform themselves to it because we frame language around it. Yeah, that really won't work for us, but that might work for other people, right? Because we all are from different local areas, but that really won't work where I'm from because nobody where I'm from uses this type of language, right? I speak to Black people all the time. Nobody uses this type of language. Allyship, never heard it, right? So it's not to take away from what they're doing. It's saying that we don't have a point of reference to talk to each other like that and have this particular perspective on these things, but we're not taking away from what they're doing. So what I want to really get you to understand, let me give an example. So let's use this, right? So let's say you live in this particular area right here. Okay. We'll call that section 1. Right? So you live in section 1. See, can I get that to get over there? Okay. We'll create another section. Let me go and get another color. Okay. Let me go back to text. This is going to be section 2. Okay. So then we'll create another one. We'll make that section 3. Okay. So you live in section 1. You know some other people that live in section 2. Y'all both together don't like section 3. Okay. That doesn't make y'all allies. It doesn't. It just means y'all both don't like the same person. Okay. So this idea to where we may have a common enemy, and then that means that we're allies and we're together. No, it just means that we're co-belligerents because we're both in a conflict against the same thing or the same section, but we're not allies. Okay. So we can feel like, okay, well, we got a problem with section 3. We got a problem, section 2 got a problem with section 3, but it doesn't mean we're on the same team. It doesn't mean that. Right? Because this right here, alliance, it has to be negotiated. Right? It actually has to be negotiated. So I think the problem is that we're being told, well, because we don't like a certain group, and now another group got the same problem with the same group, it means that we're in solidarity with them. No, we're not. Because we may have a problem with 3 and still have a problem with 2. So we are from section 1. We may have a problem with 3 and still have a problem with 2, even though 2 got a problem with 3. That's different than, let me show you an example. Let me try to do this real quick. Where we create an alliance where we're not together, and then we say, okay, we're going to work together to oppose 3. Right? But again, this has to be negotiated. So when social media activists with podcasts that are trying to get like contracts as political strategists, when they tell me that I need to be in solidarity with another group, my question is that the alliance has not been negotiated. So there is no solidarity. It's not that we want to see anything happen to anybody. It's not that we agree with government overreach. However, we've never negotiated anything with that section, with that community. So there is no alliance. We may just be co-belligerents against the same thing that we disagree with, but we're not in solidarity, right? So when we don't really understand how these dynamics should properly work, we just entertain it. I don't even entertain it because, again, these things have to be negotiated. So my section has to sit down with the other section. We negotiate what the allowance is going to be based on, what's going to be the terms, how long it's going to last. Is it just around this particular issue, or is it for a certain amount of time and then we move forward from there? But it's not going to be, oh, well, we all got a problem with the same person, so that means we're together. That, weak phrase, the enemy of my enemy is now my friend. I don't even know how that things go because it's just foolishness. It doesn't really mean that in the real world. And so I'm very hesitant to say, well, you know what? Because of another group of people who I really don't get along with like that, now have a disagreement with somebody else who I also want to get along with the first group of people that I don't get along with, we're now friends. I don't believe in that. Right? Doesn't mean that I'm trying to destroy them. It just means that we just don't get along like that. Or we don't have that kind of relationship. Or we just haven't really sat down and figure out what our terms are going to be. Right? So we have to understand the difference between being a co-belligerent and actually being an alliance, or actually somebody actually being allied together. Let me give an example of what I mean, right? This is the World War II allies. So it was multiple countries, but the main ones were the UK, the United States, and Russia. Now, because this country does a really, really bad job of teaching history, people don't really know how this thing actually works. So let me explain something to you. Russia and Germany had a treaty, right? It was like a non-aggression pact. Germany violated the treaty and invaded Russia. So then Germany and Russia now are at war. Okay. So they had a treaty between each other. Germany violated the treaty. Now they went to war with Russia. It led to their downfall because they got tied down in Russia and couldn't get out of there, right? But that's how history works, right? So when the United States and the UK decided to form this allegiance or this alliance against what we call the Axis powers, which was Germany, Italy, and Japan for the most part, Russia got on board, but Russia was never really in the alliance. Russia was just a co-belligerent because they were already at war with Germany. They already had an issue with them because initially they didn't want to go to war with them at all. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. So this is why once Germany was defeated, Russia started taking a lot of territory in Europe, right? Because there was no longer Germany there to oppose them. So then what Russia started doing was taking a whole bunch of territory, because Russia and the United States and Russia and really Western Europe were never really in an alliance. They were just co-belligerents against Germany, and they just decided, we're not going to fight each other. We'll just fight Germany right now. Once Germany was defeated, Russia went to taking a whole bunch of territory. Then we rode right into the Cold War, which lasted like another decades. So you have to really understand the difference between somebody being your ally, you being in an alliance with somebody, and them being a co-belligerent. They're not the same thing, right? So there will be no solidarity because we haven't really sat down and really figured out what the terms are. Let me give another example, kind of based on mainstream media, right? Television. Oh, my bad. Let me go ahead and show you this clip real quick. I'm tripping.
Whatever our final version of success looks like, there's no chance any of us can make it real on our own. We need the Empire to help. We need them angry. We need them coming down hard. Oppression breeds rebellion. Go together.
Krieger's a separatist. Maipei's a neo-Republican. The Gorman Front, the Partisan Alliance, sectorists, human cultists, galaxy petitionists. They're lost. All of them lost. Lost. I've never really known. What are you?
I'm the one who says we'll die with nothing if we don't put aside our petty differences.
Petty.
Okay, so that's a scene from Andor, right? And what the guy was trying to explain is that we can do more as a group of people than we can do separate. What the character on the right was explaining is that really what this is a group of rebels who are all co-belligerents against this one organized structure that they got a problem with. Okay. And so if you're looking at the beginning of this particular show, it was really about a bunch of different factions all fighting something that they're calling the Empire. He talked about it, the Maya Pay Brigade, right? That's neo-Republicans. That's one group, right? Then you got another group, the Gorman Front, co-belligerents. That's a whole nother faction. Then you got Saul Guerrero, the guy that was speaking in the particular clip. He was the leader of a group called the Partisans, right? Co-belligerents. Some people even call them anarchists, right? Then you got another group called the Neo-Separatists. Anton Krieger was a leader of that particular group. They also were co-belligerents, right? Then you got another group that are just generic, the rebels, headed by this guy called Luthen and his partner, Kaya, right? They're also co-belligerents. All those groups and those different factions, nothing was organized. They were not allies with each other, right? They were never in an alliance. They all had a problem with the same enemy. But there was no structure. There was no organization because why? Nobody sat down and tried to determine what are going to be the terms of this particular alliance. It was just all these different factions doing their own thing because why? We all got a problem with the same thing. But because we got different ideas, we got different ideology, we have different reasons why we're doing what we're doing, we can't unify around anything, right? And we're not trying to either, okay? What it took was everybody sitting down at a table and deciding, okay, we got to come up with some type of structure around it. Then they formed a rebel alliance, right? With multi-species, different types of people from different type of backgrounds where we got to sit down and come up with something that's a structured an organization that works for a larger organization. But again, it takes people sitting down. So what a lot of the resistance initially was, everybody was doing things for different reasons, right? And so until we can try to figure out what's going to be a common cause that we have, there will be no alliance. One of the biggest challenges that we have in building out these type of relationships, from my experience, is the level of disrespect that different groups have for each other. And I think that's something that's not talked about. So it's hard to build solidarity with people where we can't create a respect level, because you can't have a relationship with somebody if there's no respect between each other. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges, to where we're going to try to form all these different groups and put them all together. And then we're all going to work on the same thing, where people in those groups feel like, well, I can be disrespectful for this faction, or I can be disrespectful to this faction for whatever reason. A lot of them is just because they're trying to get their little social media off. And that won't be detrimental to the alliance, but it will be, because nobody's going to sit around for that. Right? So I think that's something that people are not familiar with, because, again, they never had to put anything together in the real world. But the majority of us are just co-belligerents. We may all have a problem with the same thing, but until we sit down at the table and come up with terms and come up with structure, come up with an organization, there will be no alliance. And that's just how this is going to work. And you don't build an alliance by trying to force people into what you're in, right? You build it by trying to figure out what kind of agreement can we create that we can all agree on, that we can build consensus on, that we not going to move forward with. Telling people they got to be part of this because of yada, 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 that's not going to work, because you're not going to tell me what I got to be a part of. That's not going to work for you, right? So I think people, because we have different definitions of words, we have different perspectives of things, we may not be receptive to somebody telling us I need to be in solidarity with a different group, because, again, they're trying to get their little media situation going. They're trying to get financed as a strategist on the political side. They're trying to be an activist and be seen as an activist. So they're trying to push this line, but I don't agree with that, right? So the reason why your group is losing is because you're not really understanding what type of relationships we need to build that are going to be beneficial to our group, right? But if I'm being denied everything from an economic standpoint, I don't see the urgency to form solidarity with somebody else when that solidarity won't solve these material conditions that I'm dealing with, right? So don't have good schools for my children to go to, currently not getting resources from the government, can't buy a home because it's too expensive, got food deserts where I currently live, got high crime where I currently live because we can't pay for police, because we can't raise taxes because the property values are so low, don't have exposure to good health care, but I'm supposed to be in solidarity with another group of people. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why not work on improving my material condition first, or would a solidarity improve my material condition? But we got situations in this country where people have been struggling for 30, 40, 50 years. I'm not sure why solidarity with another group is going to help that. So that's all I want to talk about. Again, not going to be here long. Half the video was the opening monologue, but really just want to talk about allies of co-belligerents and kind of understanding what the actual relationship dynamics are. So when somebody sits down and talks to you and says, well, this person's an ally, well, what does that mean? They don't even know you. They don't know your situation, what you're going through. Because why? They never talk to you, right? You can't just come into where I'm from in West Orlando and just plop down and think you know us. You don't know us. You're not from over here. Because if you come over there and start trying to play the word games, that's not going to work for you, because we talk how we talk. That's how we talk over here, right? So because a lot of this stuff is social media generated, it's really people trying to create a narrative to get their next little platform off. It doesn't transfer to the real world because it's not based on the real world. It's based on the internet. It's based on social media. But your real world problems are going to exist when you cut the computer off or you cut the phone off, because when you lay down at night, that's something that you got to deal with. That's all I'm going to talk about. Anybody got any comments, questions, let me know. We're going to read these super chats. We're going to go through some of these comments and we're going to get up on out of here. Raygun, man, appreciate $2 super chat. Appreciate you coming through, being a mod. Pascal, appreciate the $4.99. Emika, salute Erica Williams, found your platform by way of hers. Yeah, most definitely. I talked to a dude last Monday, a French dude. He found me through Erica. So she's been a massive connector because, again, she did a lot of legwork, and I'm going to talk about that more. She did a lot of legwork, so I didn't have to do the legwork. And so I can never appreciate that enough because everybody that's kind of gone through her filter, they know what they're going to get out of her. They're not going to get no foolishness. She's going to keep it very business-oriented. So she's been a great filter through her to people like for me, where I didn't have to do all that filtering. I did some. A lot of people have blown up and did other things, and that's, that's what they wanted to do. But I didn't have to really filter like that because I don't have the reach that she has. I still don't have 10,000 subs. So big up to her because even now in 2025, people are still finding me through her platform, right? And again, there was not her by the hood, the only people that'll really give me a platform to talk about what I'm talking about because, again, a lot of people just trying to figure out how they can trend. They want to be the next big social media person. So whatever they got to do that, that's what they're going to do. They're not going to do anything to really elevate their audience. That's just what it is. Hunting down scammers and all kinds, like it's just a lot of weird stuff, right? So big up to Erica. So Raygun says average salary for residents of Old Fourth Ward in 2000 was $30,000 average. In 2020 was $200,000. 2020 was $200,000. Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I know somebody that just not recently moved in over there, but they moved in there. And they were talking about when they first moved in there, you hear gunshots every now and then. They say all of that's gone. Same thing off of, I had talked about this last year. I was off of Boulevard, right? That whole area is being gentrified. So it is a big difference. It is a massive difference in those neighborhoods. And everybody, Ray Gun, is pretty much being pushed to the west. They're pushing everybody west because people are not going to be able to afford anything else but those areas over there. Miss Katrina says, in my city, average home selling price up 2% year over year. I feel you. Yeah, Katrina, I think once they, if they lower the rate, which I believe they will, I believe the rate definitely will get lowered before Trump's out of here. I definitely believe that. They're pushing for that. I believe there's going to be a big run on homes. I really believe that. I believe there's going to be a big run on property because a lot of people are being scared away from like 7% financing. But I believe once they lower the rate, we can get around 5. 5 will look great because we've been at 7 for so long. 4 will look even better. There's going to be a run on properties, right? And because the builders have not gone crazy building, not yet. They will once that rate gets lower. I just really see the demand on homes going up, which means price is going to go up. So I wouldn't counsel anybody to wait if they can afford it. If they can't afford it, means they just got to go make some more money. But I wouldn't counsel people to wait just like, well, you should wait to 2026. I wouldn't counsel that. But it would depend on that person's local market. What's going on, GC? I think that's something they got off a movie and just ran with it. Yeah, I feel you. I mean, I've heard the term solidarity for an extensive period of time. But again, I just think a lot of people are just trying to figure out like how to be social media activists on the internet. Anytime, GC, I've seen people that work in media, especially political media, when their candidate doesn't win, they just have to figure out how to be viable over the next 4 years. So they just come up with anything, right? And if they have a big enough platform, people buy into it. Because there are people, I'm not one of those people, where they just sit around and listen to political talk all day. Like, I don't know how people do it, but some people do. Now, they don't listen to local, they listen to national. So I just think, regardless of what side somebody's on politically, if the person they're going for doesn't win, then they got to figure out how to create content over the next 4 years. And so I think where a lot of this comes from. But it doesn't change people's material situation, right? That's their real problem. Like people can't buy houses. They just can't. They can't afford it. They don't know what to do. They don't really understand. Some of them may have to move. Like they're not being given a plan for this. Healthcare issues, school issues, like these things haven't gone anywhere. Like they're still here. So I just think a lot of these people are just trying to promote their own personal brand. And, provocative stuff on the internet works because people looking to be snapped out of their state, in my opinion. Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. Ray Gunn says the change on Boulevard is wild. Once the money came in, it's amazing how public services appear. Definitely. Because the tax rate goes up. Because taxes in Atlanta, to me, already are high compared to the suburbs. I was looking at some stuff over there off of, we talk about, was it Glenwood? Like $6,000 a year in taxes. That's not cheap. Where you can go out into the suburbs and pay like $3,500, maybe $4,000. So yeah, you're right. Once the money comes in, services show up. And there's also Ray Gunn, I apologize. I think there's a lack of educational capital where some groups know how to advocate to make sure that they get services and they will go do it. Other groups think it's just supposed to show up. Sometimes you got to go advocate for those. And you got to have people in your group that are going to go do that work and make sure that services come to our particular area. Sometimes we may not understand that. It often won't show up just because, right? But more money in the area definitely helps. So Andy Lee says, use of preferred pronouns, intersectionality, historical oppression often comes from white people from rich backgrounds that are trying to appear good, moral, luxury beliefs. Yeah, I don't know if they're trying to appeal good or moral, though. I don't know if that's their rationale or that's their motivation. I wouldn't necessarily say that. They may just see the world that way. Like I think we have different factions we talked about earlier. You just got different factions. And they see the world the way they see the world, right? I see the world different. I see the world very much based on material condition of people, right? I don't get caught into the pronouns. I look at what is your material condition? To me, that's how we boil down to what somebody's actually going through. Now, you also have psychological faith and things that nature. But from a purely secular standpoint, it's going to be your material condition, right? And so I just think you have different factions in this country that see the world differently. One thing about me, and I don't get caught into Anglo factions and their issues. I don't get caught in the middle of that stuff. But I'm also not looking for Anglos to give me money because I carry water for their message. That's not how I look to get paid. So I don't have to get caught up in that. I just don't have to. So I think we have people to where they have to carry water for Anglos for whatever Anglo faction they're dealing with, because that's how they make their money. I don't make my money that way, so I don't have to carry water for them. So I don't get caught into what they have going on because we have Anglo factions inside this country that have been fighting for decades for power. Whether they get power, don't get power, it don't benefit my group, so it don't mean anything to me, right? So I don't really get caught in the middle of that, right? It's not saying that I disengage and I don't get caught in the day-to-day. I don't get caught into none of that, right? It's just not what I do. But again, we have different groups of people that do different things. But I don't think they're trying to appeal good or moral. I think they have different motivations based on what faction they come out of and what ideology they represent. So Vic the Kid says, same situation in Game of Thrones when fighting the White Walkers, only when everybody sat down together, everyone to see the benefit of a temporary alliance. Yeah, I agree with you. They had to come together to form a coalition because they talked about if we don't come together, they're going to come through here. They're going to pick everybody apart one by one anyway, because they marching through. So you're right. They started off as co-belligerents, and then we had to form an alliance. But you still have some co-belligerents left, right? And that's kind of where we saw them attacking King's Landing at the end. But I agree with you there, right? So that's pretty much going to be it. Like I say, we ain't going to be here long. We're not really getting a lot of feedback on the actual conversation, but I appreciate everybody that did get feedback and came through. So really appreciate it. Hope y'all have a great Saturday, man. Take care of yourself. Stay blessed. Be easy.